Welcome to the Transformative Neurotherapy Podcast with your host, Dr. Heather Putney, founder and executive director of Transformative Neurotherapy. This is the place where healing happens faster. Because let's face it, your brain doesn't come with an owner's manual until now. Here, we take a holistic approach to brain health, bringing together science, mind-body harmony, and the tools you need to optimize your well-being. Whether you're a high performer, executive, athlete, longevity hacker, or just someone tired of your brain working against you, Dr. Putney is here to help you unlock your full potential. From brain fog to chronic stress, we're covering it all so you can finally experience brain health, mind harmony, and total well-being. Ready to get unstuck? Let's get started.
When a child's brain begins to regulate more effectively, the ripple effects can transform their entire world and their families. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Heather Putney, founder and executive director of Transformative Neurotherapy, back in the studio with today's guest, Cory Williams, director of Neurodiagnostics and Neurofeedback at Nashville Child and Family Wellness Center. Cory, we're so excited to have you here today and to share some more of your wonderful knowledge and some real-life experiences with bridging child psychiatry, with medications, with neurotherapy, neuromodulation. Like I said, it's such a unique opportunity to kind of work in that, triangulation of that field. And so we're just so excited to hear from your real-life experience and wisdom. So teach us today. We're at your feet.
Wow, thank you. Oh my goodness, that's so very kind of you. Thank you. Yeah, so I think one of the things that we had wanted to touch on was how does this manifest in the real world, right? What does it look like when this program is successful? What does that mean for folks? And so I was kind of thinking back through clients I've seen over the years, and I've got a couple of stories that I would like to share, if that's okay. And I use couple to mean several, so I think probably three, but I could pull more if we need. So the first one that I can think of, right, is we've got this little girl who's I think she's 8 years old when she first comes in the door, and her sort of primary concern or presenting concern is that she is super obsessive. She has a really hard time letting go of things. And it's not the obsessive kind of like OCD, like behavior based, like cleaning stuff. It's much more kind of mental ruminative stuff. She's thinking about the same thing over and over and over and over and really can't let it go. So the psychiatrist did what she's trained to do, right? She put her on an SSRI, which is for anxiety and OCD. Didn't work. And then she augmented the SSRI with an antipsychotic, which is Abilify. Didn't work. So then they get referred to me. Hey, we've tried these things. It's not working. And she's at the point of being kicked out of school. And she's going to get kicked out of school because her cousin goes to the same school and she's obsessed over her cousin. And she's like leaving class to go talk to her cousin. And she's following her cousin around on the playground and just, really obsessive thinking. So we do the EEG, and what we find is that her brain is highly, highly unstable. She's having what are likely to be seizures, although not outward. The seizures are occurring in the insula. And when you get seizures in the insula, these used to be, back in the day, these used to be called abdominal seizures. So how it affects her, she says, my stomach hurts really bad. Well, most doctors don't think of that as a seizure, right? And so everybody just kind of says, oh, she gets stomach aches because it's school avoidance. So she's saying, I'm having stomach aches, and she's really obsessively thinking. Well, the insula is in charge of the stomach and the autonomic nervous system, but also in charge of the salience network, which helps us to switch our attention between things, right? It helps us to ignore some things and pay attention to others. So her left insula is having these massive discharges that look like seizures, which are causing stomach aches and making it really difficult for her to switch tasks. So what are we going to do for that, right? Well, antipsychotics actually make seizure disorders worse. So right away, we're going to take her off the Abilify. Then we're going to put her on Lamictal, which is an anti-seizure medication, but also classifies as um, a mood stabilizer. um, so she gets put on Lamictal, and then we start doing some neuromodulation, trying to increase SMR, which I'm sure Dr. Putney, from Barry Sturman's work, is like kind of dyed in the wool, proven true for anti-seizure or seizure prevention. Um, as that part of her brain starts to become better regulated, her stomach aches go away, she's in class more frequently, she's less obsessive about her cousin, and ultimately she doesn't get kicked out of school. Now, that's great, right? We're like stoked, so happy about those outcomes. But here's like kind of a bigger sort of unnoticed piece to this. When you have seizures in your insula, it happens for one of two reasons. One is you have a seizure disorder, and that's what you have. That's what it is. Okay. Reason number two is you have a brain tumor. So when we see seizures in the insula, uh, we need to investigate that more, right? Like, it, and thankfully, knock on wood, this young girl, she doesn't have a brain tumor, and we are thrilled about that. We love that. But if she did, then what that means is we've been trying to medicate her brain tumor with antidepressant medication. And like that's just ludicrous to think of, right? So, one, we get to kind of take this off the table. Hey, we looked at the brain and it's not a tumor. Well, that's great. That's just a relief right there, right? And then two, once we get the treatment sort of dialed into what's going on, we see these huge behavioral improvements. So that's a case where the medication piece of it really had to change based on what we saw in the brain. Now I've got a couple others, and
Can I
I
just actually ask a question for,
please.
anybody listening that maybe isn't as aware of these things as I am? So, when you, like I said, see like this seizure disorder in the insula, and that you've got to rule in or rule out, possible tumor here. Like, is
Mhm,
this something that then you send this on to neurology to kind of rule in
correct.
or rule out, or is that something that you yourself are able to tell?
So in this particular case, we ordered the MRI for her. But yeah, in I think in most cases we would say, hey, listen, like you need to see a neurologist for this. I think for us it was a matter of there's really two outcomes here. It's either seizures or tumor. And if it's tumor, we need to know right away. So we didn't want to go through the like, the the phone call game where, hey, we've got a referral. Oh, hey, we can get you in 8 months. And then the neurologist sees her, and then they order an EEG, and then they read the EEG, and then they refer for imaging. It was like, a year and a half, and if it is a brain tumor, we don't wanna wait that long. So, we just ordered the MRI ourselves. But, yeah,
And
in
I'm just
most
gonna
c
say, like, that's a unique experience for you guys because you do have doctors in house that can do that,
correct.
and that's one of the things that makes that combination really efficient and great for outcomes. But for
Yeah.
people like myself that don't have psychiatrists or doctors on board, when you see these types of things, then it's an automatic refer out. We loop in neurologists to
Mhm.
try to kind of rule in or rule out and do these next steps. Then we keep going. But like I said, one thing I love about your practice is that efficiency by having that ability to kind of like get to the answers faster without having to then go to another referral process to kind of get the
Yeah.
answers down the road. So I just wanted to kind of uh, highlight that because it's super important.
Yeah, there's an interesting sort of footnote to this story. We looked at the EEG, and then we recommended an MRI because that's what we should have done. The family ended up having a bit of an argument. The insurance company refused, at least at first, to pay for the MRI. And the reason they gave was the psychiatrist shouldn't have ordered the EEG in the first place, which is ludicrous. But what the insurance company wanted us to do was to refer to neurology and then refer to, have neurology refer to imaging. And they kind of were mad at us for skipping that step. But the crazy part about that is if you're board certified in psychiatry, you are also board certified in neurology, right? It's the same board, it's the same certification. So why would the psychiatrist not be able to order this test? It's absolutely absurd. And eventually it got sorted out, but the family had to go through a bit of a like process to get insurance to cover it, which was, super, super annoying. Uh, we could do a whole like 2-hour talk on the healthcare system in this country. I'll spare you all the nasty gritty details, but yeah. Thankfully, they eventually did get it covered. We were able to rule out the tumor, and she's doing much better now, which is great, right? Um, Now, the other thing that I see a lot of, and I'm sure you've seen this too, when you do neurofeedback, neuromodulation, neurotherapy of some sort, there's usually less of a need for medication than when you first start, right? I'm sure you've seen this too. Um, and it's made for some kind of interesting, especially at the beginning, some interesting conversations. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with this process, the way that this usually works is if you're suffering from, let's say, ADHD, and the doctor prescribes you a stimulant, and the stimulant that they give you is working, right? Your attention is better, your focus is better, you're feeling sharp. Great. And then you start to do neurofeedback or neurotherapy, neuromodulation. It goes by lots of names. As the brain gets healthier and starts working more efficiently on its own, there's less of a need for medication than there was at the beginning. And what will happen is if you don't adjust the medication dosing, you start to run into side effects you did not previously have. So on the stimulant medication, the most common side effects are loss of appetite, anxiety, skin picking, and insomnia. So frequently we'll see someone who over the first 3 or 4 sessions, they say they're feeling great. By around session 6 or 7, they say, I think my anxiety is going up. And most psychiatrists are trained, if things get worse, either increase the dose or add another medication. But what we're trained to do is decrease the medication. And so that sometimes at the beginning when I first started at this job would create a little bit of friction because I would say, "Hey, I think we need to lower her dose." And the psychiatrist would say, "Why? She's getting worse, not better." And it's like, well, no, what we're running into are medication side effects that we didn't see previously. So in all of our EEG reports, we include not just the medication that the client is taking, but all of the commonly reported side effects. And we tell them, hey, if you start to experience any of these things, let me know because then it's time to start adjusting doses. So I can give you a really good example of this one. Um, I was working with a young lady who was, I guess, technically not a kid by the time we finished. She was 18 when oh, so she wasn't a kid when we started. Well, anyway, young adult. She's 18 when we started, and she was, 20 by the time we finished, I think. So she's, just started college when I started to see her, and she was on a stimulant because she was diagnosed with ADHD. She was on an SSRI because she was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. She was on a sleep medication, which I mean, it was trazodone, but still a sleep medication. And she was on what was the other one she was on? Not an antipsychotic. Um, she was on Buspar, which is an anxiolytic of sorts, right? So she's on 4 medications, which is a lot. It's kind of a lot for anyone. Um, and it also means that we're gonna have a really robust side effect profile potentially because we've got all these different meds, right? So as we got started, um, her she was an engineering major, and her parents told her, "You probably can't do this job." Right? Like, "You're too anxious, you're unfocused, it's just not gonna work, like, you should pick something that's a little less academically rigorous." And her parents made that suggestion because that's what her therapist was telling the whole family. Um, "I think you've picked a major that's too hard for you. I don't think you have enough focus to do this, I think you're too anxious to do this, I think it's a bad choice." Which, that's kind of a crappy thing to hear from your therapist, but that's an aside. So we do a brain map like we're supposed to. We start doing, and in this particular case, we were doing some neurofeedback. Um, We start targeting different networks within the brain, specifically the salience network, to switch between default mode and central executive. Uh, the first thing that happens is her sleep gets better. She just starts sleeping better. She's less awake at night, less ruminative. So as she gets going, the sleep medication drops. And that's an easy one for her to just tell the doctor, I'm sleeping better. The doctor says, okay, cool, let's just discontinue this. So then we keep going. We're doing more and more sessions, right? And her focus starts to get better. And so she tells the doctor, my focus is better. I don't want to take my ADHD medication. And the doctor says, okay, like keep it as like a PRN, right? Like use it as needed. Maybe if you have to take a test or you have to do a late night study session. Okay. And I'm so proud of this client because she did these things like kind of in the right order. If she had gone down on her, say, anxiety medication first, her anxiety probably would have spiked because she was still on the stimulant. But she went down on the stimulant first. And then she comes back to the doctor and she says, hey, listen, I'm like 35 sessions in. I feel great. My mood is great. I'm not anxious. I'm really focused in my classes. And the doctor says, okay, well, let's start to titrate down on the medication. So by the time we are finished, she did 50 sessions. And by the time we're done, she is completely off of all 4 medications. She's an honor roll student. Her advisor invited her to do a presentation to like a group of industry people, which by the way, she nailed. And then afterwards she got offered an internship. So we went from this major is too hard for you, you should quit. That's what her therapist and her parents told her, to graduating with honors and landing an internship in the field. Right? I mean, that's awesome. But and this is the coolest part of this story, right? This is the part that like as a practitioner makes me all teary-eyed. Um I asked her when we were finished, what do you think is like the biggest thing that has changed for you? And she said, when she first started college, that she knew that she wasn't getting everything she was supposed to get. So she would bring a tape recorder with her and she would record all of the lectures. And then when class ended, she would go home and listen to the lecture again and fill in the gaps in her notes. And then by the end of all of this, uh, she was getting everything in the first go round, right? In class, her notes would be complete. So then when she got out of class, she didn't have to go transcribe half the class all over again. And she told me the biggest difference for me is that I have so much more free time now. I feel like I'm actually doing the college experience. I'm going out to lunch. I'm getting coffee with my friends. I don't worry if I show up to a class hungover, like, which, we can argue about pros and cons there, but for her, it was transformative because it doubled, tripled her amount of free time. And that to me was like, oh, like, you don't see it, but like she was missing out on the sort of quintessential college experience because she was working so hard to get C's in this degree she wanted so badly. And so by the end of all the neurofeedback that we did, she's getting to experience college in a much more like socially healthy way while also having better grades and doing better in her academic coursework and what eventually became her career. So that's another one where it's like, not only did we have to come down on the medication, and now she's, by the way, has stayed medication free, but also everything else came along with it. It's just such a fun success story, that one.
I love to hear about that one. It's just like the difference in the quality of life and
Yeah.
the life work balance, right?
Yeah.
Like because it's not her brain is functioning higher at a higher level. It's so much more efficient that they're
Mhm.
able to do things in much less time, and that is also one of the benefits I see over and over again. Insert client blank, and then later, like it's just like things just work better. Things are just more efficient. They're used to a lot more resistance to get anything quote unquote normal done,
Yeah.
compared to other people. And they're just kind of amazed at like, oh wow, this is what life can be like. Cause that used to be my baseline. And now I've got a new baseline and it's
Uh-huh.
incredible.
Yeah.
So
It really is. And so kinda along those lines, right? And this next one that I'll tell you about is really cool to just think about, like, long-term trajectory. And this one isn't as medication related, but I saw he was in, is it 2nd grade? Yeah, 2nd grader. Yep, yeah, because he goes to 3rd. So he's a 2nd grader, right? And he comes to me and, um, he's not reading anywhere close to grade level. Now, he's diagnosed with dyslexia and autism spectrum disorder, and he was bullied at his previous school, so there's a little bit of, like, kind of trauma, PTSD around school, right? So it's a complicated case, there's a lot to work on, there's a lot to do. Um, and we started off by kind of working on some of the trauma pieces and then a little bit of the kinda communication and executive function stuff. Well, we hit winter break, and I was talking with his mom, and she says, "We've been doing these letter flashcards, and he knows, I don't know, maybe like 12 letters out of the alphabet. Like he doesn't even know half of them. He doesn't recognize the letters. So of course he's not reading at a grade level. Like he doesn't know the alphabet yet. So they have a private reading tutor for him. It's going okay. And over winter break, my mom says, "I think all we're gonna do is neuromodulation. We're gonna stop the tutoring. We're gonna take winter break off. We'll pick it back up once school starts again, but I want him to have like a Christmas vacation." So, okay, great. So we started doing what are called phase amplitude coupling protocols. So I'm sure you're kind of slightly familiar with this, right? But basically the premise here is that you look at the brain in action. So instead of watching the brain while a person just sits in a chair, you watch their brain while they pay attention to something. And you try to measure within that attentional network what areas are connecting and what areas are not. And when we did his assessment, right, to see, what in your brain is connecting and what isn't, we see that all the areas associated with like shape and object recognition and memory are not connected. Like, so of course he doesn't remember the letters, right? These parts of his brain that do those jobs aren't talking to each other. So when you do phase amplitude coupling training, you put one sensor where that area is, and you put another sensor where the other area is, and you train them to talk to each other very specifically. And it's called phase amplitude coupling because you're using a theta wave, which is stable over long distance, and then you're joining gamma on top of the theta wave. And so the two are in phase, they go up and down at the same time, even though they're kind of different waves. And gamma within the brain acts a little bit like glue. It binds networks together. So we target these two areas that don't talk. We run theta and gamma at the same time between them. After 2 weeks, his mom comes back to me and she says, "Well, he just did another like letter flashcard test. He got 24 out of 26 correct. I don't know what you did, but this is amazing. By the end of the year, he's reading at grade level and they're no longer talking about holding him back." So when you think about long-term trajectory, right? To have that big a reading deficit. I mean, he's reading essentially at a pre-K level. And he's supposed to be reading by like late 2nd grade level, right? That's a full 2-year gap in his ability to read. And once you get to 3rd grade, the curriculum shifts. You no longer learn to read, you read to learn. And if you're not a strong reader by 3rd grade, everything becomes so much harder because now you're learning about material, that you're reading the material to learn, facts, history, science, like all that kind of stuff, right? So to make that shift and to sort of catch that issue before hitting such a pivotal time in his academic development is huge. I mean, that is the definition of life changing. And maybe it would have come along with mentoring and the individual reading coach, maybe. But if those two parts of his brain aren't talking to each other, I gotta think that it's not. If it does come along, it's gonna be a struggle for him. So we get those two parts of his brain turned back online, and now he's on course to look. He's still gonna have autism. I'm not. We cure autism. No, nothing does that, right? he's still probably going to have some dyslexic issues in terms of maybe some reversals or word reversals. But the to be able to close the distance in such a short period of time becomes absolutely transformative for his future trajectory.
And I'm going to ask this as a devil's advocate here. So we do this treatment at this intensive level, and you see these major shifts. Um, does it regress, or what happens after the fact?
Yeah, so, I think the easiest way for me to explain this question is I haven't seen him since. So so we're probably good, right? Because after I saw him, I saw his brother and his dad and his grandpa. I haven't seen him since. So I'm guessing things are in a good spot. But, the sort of longer answer to your question is I do expect things to regress. I think that, uh, if we take 3 steps forward and then we stop, I expect half a step backwards. But if he's reading at pre-K and we get him up to 2nd grade and then he takes half a step backward and he's at late 1st grade, the teacher in the classroom can help with intervention at that point, right? Reading is both a brain piece, but also a skills piece. And part of the regression there is gonna come from, well, he can now he can recognize the letter T and the letter H, but he doesn't know they make a different sound when they're together, right? And that's the reading piece, that the skill piece that has to come along. So, I expect there's gonna be some small amount of regression, but the course correction here is the most important piece, right? I mean, if we're thinking about like an XY axis, he's a flat line down at the bottom. He does neurofeedback and suddenly it's an upward arc. And if there is regression, maybe the slope of that upward arc flattens some, but it's still an upward trajectory. And that to me was the most important part for this kiddo.
That's really exciting, and I think it, begs a couple of different, questions or comments here in the sense that why it's beneficial. People ask, "Is this okay with kids?" Or, "Is this safe to do with kids?" Especially neuromodulation when we're adding things like low-level electricity or the PEMF or the LED lights, and the people are like, "Oh, is this safe for kids? Can we do this with kids?" And, what your experience is, I mean, is this safe with children to do, like, these types of interventions?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. That thought, uh, I answer this question all the time because obviously parents are worried, they're nervous, they're concerned, but, yes, it's absolutely 100% safe, right? And one of the things that we do in our office, so the sort of, like, recommended safety standard for this type of intervention in terms of how strong is the electrical signal is 4 milliamps. Now, some companies make equipment that goes stronger. The equipment we use in our office only goes up to 2.5. I start all of our kids at zero point 0.1. So we are starting at like the lowest level. And some kids never get past point 0.2, and we still see really good results. And we get really good results because the way that this works, yes, we're using electricity, but the primary driver of the intervention is actually entrainment, right? The brain is copying the frequencies that we show it. And that's why they get healthier and more efficient. That's why things get better because the brain is changing its own electrical patterns. It's not like we are shocking the brain, right? I mean, I would even argue that at point 0.1 milliamps, you're not generating enough current to get through the skull into the brain, right? Like, it's like physically impossible for that level of electricity to get that deep into the cortex. So what we're really doing is we are showing the brain a pattern and asking the brain to copy it. And the brain is a copycat. It likes novelty. It likes to copy new things. Um, so yeah, absolutely, it's safe. Um, Sometimes the sensors can be a little itchy, and we buy like a topical numbing cream from CVS, or Walgreens or wherever. Like, it's like I think it's called anti-itch cream or anti-burn cream, and we put that on, and most kids don't even notice the sensors are on. And so they come in and they just hang out for 30 minutes, and their brains get trained. It's really cool.
That's super exciting. Well, it's really fun to hear the real life stories. We talk
Yeah.
about sometimes these interviews, we talk about things in theory, but
Yeah.
it's, we're humans and we like to be, and I know for me, it's like, I want the stories. I want to know, like, what did this look like and how did this change this person's life? And know each
Mhm.
person's unique, but just seeing like how it can change, like you said, the trajectory of a person's life is massive.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely, and, you work in a sort of clinical setting, so do I, right? And one of the reasons that people get into clinical work in the first place is because we want to help people. Speaking for you here, I'm assuming most clinicians that I've met have have gotten into this field, into this type of work because they want to help and they want to see people get better. And so all the theory in the world is great and reading all through the technical manuals and protocol placements and set right. That's all really cool stuff. I'm a nerd. I love that stuff. But a huge part of this work is seeing how it impacts people on a day-to-day basis. And that for me is like the absolute the best part of the job, right? Is getting to see people grow and change and get better. And then when you're working with kids, you don't get to see the final, the 8-year-old that I worked with, I don't get to see her as an adult, right? I mean, it's very rare that we get that sort of longitudinal data or tracking of any kind, but knowing that we have course corrected, like you said, the trajectory has changed is so cool. It's just, it's yeah, the best part of the job for sure.
yeah, I know in our job, sometimes the best thing that can happen is for them to fire you, but I call it graduating because they've reached their goals,
Right.
and then and so it's like, this is actually the goal. It's not to keep you dependent on us, but
Right.
for us to do the course correction for your brain to kind of figure out what it needs to do and be able to do it on its own without having to rely on people or medications or some other things for forever. So it's
Mhm.
super fun.
Yeah, the graduation is a really fun thing, and there have been a few clients, like, over the years where we've actually gone out of our way to get graduation presents for them because, it's been such, like, a long and difficult journey, and, I'll tell you one more, the I worked with a client with, a pretty severe eating disorder, and she's a teenage girl, and one of the things that she really struggled with at the beginning was that she wasn't sleeping, and she would get anywhere from, like, 1 to 3 hours of sleep a night. Well, first of all, that's just not enough. Like, we everybody knows that's not enough, right? Um, we know she's gonna feel worse every day because of that. And, um, longitudinally, we know the biggest predictor of early onset dementia is poor sleep when you're younger, right? So if you're not sleeping in your teens, 20s, 30s, your likelihood of developing dementia is through the roof. So um, that's my concern. She's not sleeping enough. Yes, the eating disorder is also a concern, and the sort of locked in rigidity that we see in those types of cases. So we did a bunch of sessions. She was working with a dietitian and a therapist. Eventually the eating disorder sort of stabilizes, although I don't know that I can make all the claims to that, right? Like, she had a whole team of people supporting that work. At the end, when she turned 18 and said, like, "I'm never coming back." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine." And at the end, like, maybe her last session or second to last session, um, she told me, I'm glad I'm never gonna see you again. And to be honest, I'm kind of angry with you." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, what happened? Like, what's the matter?" And she said, when I first started coming here, I could stay up all night and I could get stuff done. I could talk to my friends and I would only get an hour or 2 of sleep, but that was fine. And that was my superpower. And now I sleep like 7 or 8 hours a night and it's all your fault." I said, "You know what? I'll take the hate on this one. That's fine. You can be mad at me for that, and I know that you're gonna be in such a better place for it, so it's all good." Um, yeah. So that one that she made me laugh pretty hard when she graduated. She's mad about it.
Well, Cory, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom and just for these, exciting stories that you got to tell us, because I know there's a lot of people out there, either they've got a child that's feeling stuck or they themselves are feeling stuck and maybe a
Yeah.
little bit hopeless and they don't really know what to do. So just being able to hear like real people's experiences and how they got unstuck and they got to move forward with these different modalities is really exciting and very hope filling. So we really appreciate and thank you for the wonderful work that you do for this field and also for your clients.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always fun to share the success stories. It's like I said earlier, it's why we get into the field in the first place, right? And yep, for people out there who are looking for hope, this is certainly. I can't tell you the number of clients I have seen over the years who have come in and said, "This is our last hope. We've tried everything else, nothing else has worked," and then ends up being the thing that works. And it's because we're working on what the brain needs, right? We're not guessing, we're looking at the brain, we're understanding how it's working currently and how we can improve its function. So yeah, it's a super fantastic modality.
Thank you. I completely agree. And I thank you so much for the work you do and for your time today. And until we see each other again, thank you so
Fantastic.
much.
Take care.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Transformative Neurotherapy Podcast with Dr. Heather Putney. Remember, your brain isn't supposed to hold you back. It's supposed to power you forward. So stop letting it crash your party and start letting it do its job. If you're ready to optimize brain health, sharpen your focus, and age like a fine wine, schedule your free consultation today at transformativeneurotherapy.org or call us at 412-204-7397. Because here, healing happens faster. See you next time.